Hey everyone, have you ever had one of those days where like you were so sure of something and then someone's like, no, that's not how it is. And then you were like, what? So yesterday I used the song the overture of 1812 in my video. And today I was talking about the War of 1812 with my wife, who is English. And I said, yeah, so when we won the War of 1812, and she's like, wait, you think you won the War of 1812? I said, yeah, of course. England came over, they burned the White House, and then we won. And she was like, no, we won. I was like, I gotta get to the bottom of this now. I gotta find out what is the real history.
The war began as a result of England's attempts to force Americans to join the Royal Navy, to limit our trade with France, and to prevent our westward expansion. Though the outcome was inconclusive, the war gave Americans confidence of their place in the world.
There were no battles in the War of 1812 of the scale or significance of Trafalgar and Waterloo, and perhaps as a consequence the conflict is not widely remembered, except among historians.
It's important to note that in commemorating the outcome of the War of 1812, we understand that as a result of this conflict, Britons, Canadians, and Americans never waged war with one another again.
Basically, this is how I was taught it. In the year 1812, England attacked America, burned down the White House, and then through a series of naval and ground victories with Andrew Jackson and William Henry Harrison, both future presidents, at the charge, we found victory against the English, and their attempts to retake America were done. So the war starts in 1811. So England was doing some things that America didn't like. England was at war with France and Napoleon. England was being accused of stopping American merchant vessels and even some Navy vessels and taking anyone who had a British accent off those vessels and sort of kidnapping them and enlisting them into the British Navy. This was the understanding, and this was what was being talked about. And so the president at the time, in 1811, James Madison, and a bunch of other people who were of the Republican Party at that time, really wanted to go to war with England. So they passed it in the Congress. It was not like a huge margin, but they had passed just enough to go to war. And then their first step was to invade Canada. America was invading Canada. So James Madison supposedly said something like, well, the Canadians are going to be really happy to see us. They're going to be really happy to see us. They will want us to help them liberate their nation. But when the American soldiers did show up, the Canadians were there with muskets to repel them. So the White House did get burned down, but in 1813. The War of 1812 is just kind of this big mess. It's hard to really track down what each nation's motivation was. England seems to be mostly interested in just kind of like quelling whatever is going on. They were fighting war with Napoleon. They didn't want to have to deal with a second war, so they were just trying to wrap it up as quickly as possible. And Canada was just like, we just want to be left alone, I guess. And America was trying to right wrongs, maybe, but maybe they were just trying to, take advantage of an ambition that they had to take over Canada. James Madison and some other people were sending delegates over to England to get a treaty signed, because they were like, okay, so this isn't working out, so let's just have some peace. And there was too many people dying. So they eventually did sign a peace treaty. That was after the White House burned. So this was actually in 1814. So the treaty signed, right? Then 2 weeks later is the first major American victory in the War of 1812. 2 weeks after the treaty signed. Then, because most of the people hear about the war before they hear about the treaty, because the treaty's news has to cross the ocean, right? And on a sailing ship, it takes a little while to cross the Atlantic. So they're waiting on news about the treaty, but the news about the victory, the American victory, which is in New Orleans, just starts spreading like wildfire. And so everyone gets this perspective like, oh, well, we won the war. So I don't really know what to think about it, but I was taught that we won the war. And it's very clear that everyone just kind of there's like a ceasefire. The treaty more or less was just, there's a ceasefire. America doesn't get any new territory. Canada doesn't lose any territory. England doesn't lose any territory. Everything just goes back to the way it was before the war started. And I think this is why all the nations kind of disagree. Each of the three main countries, America, England, and Canada, all kind of claim that they were the winners of the War of 1812. Strange. It's kind of a strange thing. But I'm going to turn this into a series. Things that I thought that I knew, I was lied to about. And so yeah. That's all you need to know today. So leave a comment in the description, leave a comment down below about something that you feel that, history, science, anything that has to do with understanding the world, that you feel you were taught a lie. And then as you got older, you realized, oh my gosh, my whole life I've believed this thing that was not true. And suddenly someone challenged me, and now I have to face the reality that I've believed the falsehood. I'm really interested by these things. The way that they come about, the way that the reason that they exist in the first place, like why someone would lie about something, or how things get miscommunicated through time and throughout history. And I think to me, that might be one of the most fascinating things about history, is how we tend to miscommunicate. So I'll leave a link in the description for the documentary that I saw. And I will also make a video tomorrow, because that's what I'm going to do. And that is what I do. So see you tomorrow. And, wear normal clothes.
For the Whitecap Dakota and many other First Nations, our participation in the War of 1812 as allies of the Crown remains an important part of our history. For First Nations, this was a nation-to-nation alliance, which included British promises for our First Nations homeland and a protection of their territories. Following the signing of the Treaty of Ghent in 1814, First Nations discovered that they had been effectively abandoned by their allies. Contrary to the promises of the British, the Indigenous inhabitants of this land were left out of peace negotiations. But despite these outcomes, First Peoples in Canada continue to uphold and respect their partnership with the British Crown. The story of First Nations in the War of 1812 is everyone's story. It is just as much about building what would later become the nation of Canada as it is about solidifying of a Canadian identity, and the contribution of the Dakota Nations remains a significant part of this story.